It feels like you can get your credit scores anywhere these days. Random websites, card statements, budgeting apps, heck, even your dog might bark out a few numbers. It's true. Credit Karma isn't the only place you can find them. But we actually do more with your scores to help you find your next financial opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! The possibilities are kinda endless. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means. It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop early holiday deals now.
Chronic migraine is 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for adults with migraine with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It prevents, on average, 8 to 9 headache days a month versus 6 to 7 for placebo.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Ask your doctor and visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Welcome, everyone, to the G-Note Podcast. I am your host, as always, Jason Spicy G. Goldman, and I'm a Grammy-winning record producer, arranger, and musician. I've been a music professor at USC for over 22 years, and I am most known for writing and producing music for the iconic Michael Bublé over the past 20 years. This is a pod for musicians who want advice and strategies on navigating the music industry. If you're not a musician but a music fan, I promise there's plenty in here for you as well. On this pod, we talk all things music. On today's pod, I'm sharing with you my interview I did with one of the most killer bassists and vocalists in town here in Los Angeles, Miss Katie Thiroux. Let's go.
Belongs to somebody else. He means his tender songs for somebody else.
My guest today is an outstanding jazz bassist and vocalist from Los Angeles. She is an incredible teacher and colleague of mine at USC. Currently, she is also the director of Women in Jazz for the legendary Monterey Jazz Festival, and she is a dear friend. Please welcome Katie Thiroux. It's great to have you, Katie.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We are obviously colleagues at USC. Let's dive into some hard stuff first. You and I are kind of more, I would say, more traditionalists in jazz than many jazz musicians, I guess, these days. Meaning, for those that aren't really familiar with the genre of jazz, meaning we like the feeling of swing, which to me is kind of the essence of jazz. Do you think swinging in jazz is still one of the core elements in the music, or do you feel jazz is kind of departed from that? What's your thoughts?
So me personally, yes, swing is a core element of jazz. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. For other people, I don't think it exists in their definition of jazz and the music that they play, which is cool. Because now there's like almost 1,000 different subgenres of jazz. But the people who sound great, they all come from jazz. And actually more than that, bebop. Like you'll find out, you'll like, hear a smooth jazz player. And then they'll start talking to you about like, oh man, I just love this Charlie Parker solo. And then they can cut, they can play all that stuff. So I think at the root of it, being into jazz and even like blues, like that's the core of it. And then you can do whatever you want and be successful. And the most successful people usually are.
But don't you think, I mean, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I mean, again, because you and I are very similar on this, but when I listen to a lot of modern jazz records today, sometimes I feel like it's like Hide the Meter or they'll do everything in their power to not set the form up, or, I mean, don't you think that we've kind of gotten away from some of the traditional elements? And is that a good or bad thing? I mean, I don't know. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think for some people, they literally just can't swing. So that's what they do. They play another kind of music. Then to me, it's not jazz. And then people who hide the form and do all sorts of fun things. For me, that's more almost scientifical. That's like I'm in a lab and I'm studying and I'm mixing this chemical and that chemical to see what's going to happen. Yeah. And never coming back home to one makes me feel uncomfortable. And then I think those people aren't thinking about the audience at all, which is also really, that's why I play this music.
That's actually a great point. Let's dive into that a little bit too. I mean, this is, I guess, it's philosophical in nature. I mean, because again, as jazz musicians, we've kind of, we're not really the popular music anymore. Not since what, the 50s, maybe the 60s. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of musicians, jazz musicians, don't really think about the audience that way. I mean, do you think number one, that's a priority still, or do you think it should be a priority? I mean, what's your thoughts on it?
If people are paying tickets, yeah.
Yeah,
people are coming to pay to see you. It should be a priority. Whether that means you're, playing. I got this advice secondhand from Ray Brown. I studied with Tierney Sutton when I was 12 years old, voice, and Ray Brown kind of helped her a little bit. They were doing a festival together. And to me, she was always amazing. And it took her a long time to get her due. And he said, you got to play music that people want to hear. And then that kind of changed for her, that shifted. And I never forgot that. I always remembered that. Play music people want to hear in your set. And I do this too. It's like, I'm going to play something, maybe that's just for me or for the musicians on stage. Because again, I want all of us to be having fun. But it's like, throw in, for a while, I would like do a Beatles medley. And it's like, because that spans all sorts of genres. So it's like, it's got to be a give and take. But yeah, the audience.
So you're saying that you're still trying to do either standards or even modern contemporary music that are not quote unquote standards. By the way, for everyone listening, if you're not familiar with jazz, I mean, a lot of the things that we do are play what's called from the American Songbook, which are like famous Broadway tunes back in anywhere from the 20s all the way up to the 40s or 50s, even the 60s. So I guess, are you saying that you still will throw one of those tunes in, but you're still playing maybe some challenging originals? I mean, what's the thought
exactly.
process?
Like you'll throw one of those in, play an original, and then it's always when you play an original, it's like tell the people why you're playing it. I wrote this song because, and then it gives them a little bit of a connection and something to go away with, and you never know what's going to stick for somebody.
Yeah. I just did an episode actually on audience engagement because I find that half the time, especially jazz musicians, they don't ever really explain their music. They're like, okay, we're going to do this tune. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's hard enough for people to get, sit down to listen to jazz as it is. So don't make another barrier.
Yeah. What do you love about jazz? And if you could try to explain it in a layperson way, because people listening, I have a lot of people that listen to this pod that are not jazz musicians and they don't really get it a lot of times. I mean, they know whether they like the music or not. But what do you think makes jazz so special to you and to others?
I think unlike today's popular music, whether that's like actual pop or rap, whatever's going on, that's so stagnant. And, there's like only 3 chords happening right now. And so with jazz, there's already more options for your ear to latch onto, which makes it more of a unique and individual experience with just like chords and melody instruments and then the lyrics on top of that. I mean, the lyrics, like you listen to Cole Porter, he wrote his own lyrics and melody, like what is this thing called love? There's so many different ways that someone can take jazz music. And that's the fun thing too, when you're performing and someone comes up to you, they might take your interpretation of a song in a completely opposite direction, which is, I think, a lot more possible for that to happen than, let's say, like today's traditional pop music when I can't even say the words that they're saying today. But, there's really only one way to take things.
Right.
It's very literal, which in jazz, it's like a lot more figurative, imaginative. And there's a lot of imagination involved.
What's the essence of jazz to you? Like, if someone was like, man, what should I be listening to? If I'm going to go to a jazz show and I don't really know jazz, and you're going to take a friend who's like, doesn't know anything, like what's the essence? What should they be listening for?
I think they should be listening, but also feeling it. Like that, you could feel it in your body too. It's like, okay, like since people may not know jazz on your podcast, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like more of a 2 and 4 beat, but you should start moving and probably be unaware of it. But you might be like, oh man, I'm moving my butt in my seat. So it should literally move you.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, again, to me, it always comes from swing feel. And I mean, the thing is, you know, we're always asked to define jazz at some point. I mean, I'm sure it's come up plenty of times to you, like, what is jazz? You know, for me, it's an easy one, but I think at this point to say that is very controversial.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if someone said to you, what is jazz? And I'll say it to you right now. What do you think jazz is? What is it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's swing. It's something that swings. That's what it is to me.
That's what it is to me too. But I mean, you get so many different arguments. Like to me, the core of jazz is the swing feel because there's no other music that does that feel.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get the other people on the converse that are always like, well, this could be jazz too. And that I'm like, I don't know if I call it jazz sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just instrumental music. And just because there's improvised, I mean, shit, Bach improvised.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know. I feel I'm very, very much in the same fashion as you, is that I think that swing is really what jazz is.
Yeah, and I think people who play modern music and never learned how to swing or play the blues, it has a different vibe.
Yeah.
And we could say, you know, two people, one person who's done it the swing way and one who has just gone straight to the modern, and it's going to feel and sound different.
I agree with you. And one of the main things is the hump, really.
Yeah.
And this is a great segue because you also do a podcast called The Hump.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can explain to those again who don't really listen to jazz what the hump is and how that is different from some of the other genres of music.
Yeah, your hump is like your thing, it's your groove, and it's often referred to like coming from the bass. The bass player has you'd say like, man, that bass player has a great hump, which just means they have a great feel, whether they're walking on all four beats or they're playing a two feel, it doesn't matter. Like that's to me where it comes from. And I always I take that further. It's like the hump is like your thing. So it's like, man, that chef has a good hump, you know? That was a good sauce tonight, you know? And if it's not grooving, if there's no hump, no matter what tempo or what style you're playing, it just doesn't feel good. It's not going to happen. And I listen, like, you go back and listen to Ahmad Jamal from the 50s, and like there's so much hump there and so much groove coming from everybody, from the piano, the bass, and the drums, Vernal Fournier. And everyone always, it's like, for me, like Ahmad Jamal is like a directed, like the tree trunk of like R&B music almost. Yeah. And you listen to Vernal Fournier and everything he's doing with his bass drum. And like, yeah, that's got a hump. And then like the good R&B music has a hump. You listen to D'Angelo, like there's a groove there.
That's really interesting because, you know, when I think of swing, it's not always like spang-a-lang all the time. To me, it's the essence of swing, which really is that hump.
Yeah.
And maybe for even a little more clarification, right? Because a lot of swing music is the bass playing quarter notes, and then the swing on the ride cymbal and the 2 and 4 on the hi-hats. To me, it's that combination of how they sync together. That's really that hump. Maybe is.
Yeah. That's a great explanation of it too. And you could have a bass player and a drummer that are both equally amazing on their own, but when they get together, it doesn't sound good and it doesn't feel good. And I've had that happen to me. Plenty of people where I've just been like, wow, I cannot wait to play with this person. They've been on my bucket list, and then we go to play it. I'm like, ooh, this doesn't feel good, and there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And neither of us should really have to change what we do. I mean, for the sake of the music, let's not make it sound like crap.
Right.
But it's surprising, and it's kind of, you never know until you do it and feel it. And so if you're not a musician, when you go to listen to music, just yourself trying to groove along to it is an important thing.
Let me tie this, obviously segue it to your podcast, which is, as I mentioned, is called The Hump. Maybe you can give us a little detail as to what it is. I mean, I've listened to a bunch of episodes and it's killer. For those that don't know, Katie has a podcast. Like I said, it's called The Hump. It's really a fantastic podcast. Katie, let us know what it's about so everyone can check it out.
Yeah, it's about bass players mostly. I sprinkle in a couple of non-bass players. They're okay too. And kind of like getting to that hump of them as a musician, like just their background. I think of these people as superheroes sometimes. So it's like, how did they get to where they were? Like, what was their origin story, basically? And I wanted to start it before the pandemic because I used to travel a lot. And so I was thinking like, oh, I'm on an international tour and I've got the day off. Let me go. I'd love to meet this person and interview like this bass player in France or something. But then I started it during the pandemic on Zoom. And I was able to like stack some really great people and meet some people. And so I had Christian McBride and Larry Grenadier, John Clayton. And it's been really fun to just learn from them. And they share everything, you know, the good and the bad and the ugly and their mistakes, things that worked. But it's been fun community building too.
So you bring in pretty much, you've brought in some of the icons of acoustic bass.
Yeah.
And you rap with them for an hour?
Until we're done. Until we're done rapping, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't checked it out, you should check it out. Katie's show is called The Hump. Take a listen to it because it is really fantastic. And some of those players, I should say all of them on there are pretty incredible and great interviews.
Yeah, it was kind of like, wow, we had Rufus Reed, we had Derek Hodge, and then our non-bassist, we had Walter Smith III. Yeah, it's been really cool.
All right, let's pick it up on the business of music, because one of the things that I've been really fascinated with you in particular is how good you are at social media. I mean, if you haven't seen Katie, what's your Instagram handle?
It's just my name, Katie Thiroux.
Katie Thiroux.
Nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy. But if you haven't seen your Instagram, you have a nice following and you're posting a lot. Like, I guess the first question is, are you setting aside multiple days to do these videos, or do you have specific days that you're doing it? How does it kind of, how do you make it work?
Now it's just like when I actually, to be honest, since I have a 1-year-old daughter, if I think I want to post something, it's like I do it like I might edit it at 7 in the morning and then, okay, I'll post it at 8 or something like that. But in terms of content, I started doing this during the pandemic. I was just like, oh, I'll share some stuff because I was really bad at technology as a whole, and I'm okay with it now. It's like it's not great, but I started. Okay, let me just post what I'm working on. Basically, that's all it is. And I'm like, honesty is the only policy, so it's just everything I'm working on. So for myself, I practice. I video myself practicing a lot, and I practice in front of a mirror just for my own edification of like, what's my hand position? Am I breathing right? And so I might go back and be like, oh, let me just splice that up and post it. But yeah, to be honest, I don't put too much thought into it. The things that I say, like the writing, the copy, I want that to be meaningful because people are reading it of all ages. So I don't want to say something that puts someone in the wrong direction or, makes them feel bad about themselves. Like I like to give good information. That's my goal because there's so much garbage out there.
And you do. I mean, you have an Instagram segment which is KT's tips.
Yeah.
Right? Is it like I always felt like there's at least a couple a week that you're posting it, right? At least?
Yeah, I post that I try to do every Friday, like every tip.
Okay.
And I try to they're usually all encompassing for like whatever your level is, whatever music, like whatever instrument you play. So if you're a singer or otherwise, I try to make it accessible. And the reason why I started doing that too during the pandemic, because I was just like, man, there is so much bad information. Not to say that I have like the number one best information. There's millions of ways to do things. But people would ask me a question and said, well, I learned how to do it this way. And I'm like, from where? From what? Oh, on TikTok, this person. I'm like, right. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. We get information from different places. But I thought, okay, let me just in this little corner post something that has worked for me. And I've had some really great teachers, one being John Clayton. And he got stuff passed down to him. So for me, this is like the modern way to share information, like good information with people.
You chose... I mean, I looked at obviously all your socials, but it seems like Instagram is your main thing, right? I mean, I saw you have a little bit on TikTok and a little bit on Facebook, or your Facebook's pretty substantial as well. Do you just post pretty much now to Instagram? I mean, because again, it seems like you post almost every day.
Yeah, for me, I would say advice for people, it's like use all the platforms, but Instagram is just literally it's the easiest for me to use. So that's why I use it the most. I just saw on Facebook, I was like, oh, I have a 10,000 following on Facebook, because that's a different generation that uses that there. And since that's like more bass players follow me there, and they're mostly older men. And so like that's how they can use it's an easier program to use. They probably use it on the computer. So, and that's something, it's like, yeah, I need to get better at posting on Facebook. And then I did YouTube for a while and I had a big thing there, but it takes a lot of time and it's not as easy. So Instagram is so easy.
How are you? I always ask this because I freaking hate social media. I've told you this before, you know that. I do it out of necessity because we have to, but I don't understand how people have the time to do it. Or maybe I just need to dedicate some time to do it. Are you dedicating, like, because I know you said like, oh, sometimes it's like, oh, you're going to practice, so you'll just put your camera up and just start shooting video. Are you always doing that, number one, when you practice? And number two, it's like, do you have some spots where you're like, okay, today I'm going to just do content?
No, I don't have that. So I think about it, to be honest, very little about if I'm like producing content. So that's why I never say I'm a content creator, because it's like more I'm just sharing, aspects of my life. For like KT's tips, I do edit. And I'm sorry, everybody, I use iMovie to edit that because I don't know how to
That's awesome.
use because it's already on my computer, okay? And so I can use that to edit it. And I know like you got to learn from younger people. I'm 36. And so I think like, what would a 12-year-old girl do, to post? And they're good at posting. And I've had some other younger people tell me like, okay, you got to edit out all the breaths. So it's like, you got to make it, it's not that it has to be short, but like you don't want to have any lag time. So I got good at that and just like, zooming in and out and stuff like that. So that could take me an hour to edit, even though the tip only took me 5 minutes to do. But I put some thought into it because I kind of think if I'm doing a tip, a lot of people have asked me this question recently, and instead of addressing one person at a time, okay, let me just help everybody.
Yeah. And so, I mean, because it just seems like such a world, again, of content. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say, like, you don't really think of it necessarily as content as much as, well, this is just what I'm doing, so I'm just going to roll it out there. But do you think about, like, if you're doing a new album, I'm assuming you kind of have a whole plan and a rollout plan. Would that be accurate?
That is accurate. And I've actually only released kind of like 2 records since I've had Instagram. And I say kind of because the first one was during the pandemic and it was like a live recording that I had. And the quality wasn't great. But it really gave you that atmosphere of like, okay, I'm at a live show. So I thought, okay, let me release this so people are sad and depressed during COVID and you can pretend like you're somewhere live.
Right, of course.
So, and I didn't actually have my Instagram that dialed in even at that point. But I think it did help, like sharing it. And then I did this Christmas record, which was almost the same idea. I just recorded it in my bedroom with some crappy microphone into iMovie. And then my brother edited it for me.
Who also plays bass.
Yeah, he also plays bass. Yeah. I was a little bit more methodical because I did make actual video content for that I had my friends videotape, because I think nowadays it's really important to have if you're going to be streaming, you should always have videos, some sort of video available as well to go along with your record.
I mean, I agree. Again, I just, how I feel about it. It's like, it just takes so much freaking work that I'm like, man, but a lot of the people that listen to this always want to know these strategies that everyone does. I mean, you've built up, I think it's like 16, 17,000 followers on Instagram. Did you ever run ads? Did you ever boost your posts? I mean, did you ever or is it just straight organic? You went out into the world, did some tours, and you got your
I would say since I have had Instagram, which I think was like really like 2016 or 17, I've maybe done 3 ads for like a gig where I was like, I always want to make sure I'm doing my part too, because I book all my own shows. I have just found that to not be so successful for me. So it's more of like when I was building, I made a separate Instagram for my podcast, The Hump. So it was more like, okay, let me follow these people, let me message them. Like I had to be a little more boots on the ground for that, which worked a lot better. But with my, like the cool thing about Instagram is like if you have sometimes things just pop, like a reel, and I never produce things or like put things up there going like, okay, this is going to be the one. If I ever have that idea, like, man, this is a really cool arrangement, then there's like, crickets.
Right.
But like, I remember I posted one thing, and again, it was my own practice. And I just knew, I was like, yeah, this is probably going to like, people will like it. I transcribed, because I was working on 26-2, and I was like, man, what do you play as a bass line on this?
Yeah.
And so I transcribed the original one, and it was pretty much what I thought. You're repeating a lot of roots.
Right, yeah.
And then I do this a lot. I'll transcribe the solo over something and play it at the same time. So I posted that because that's what I was working on. And then people, they dug that. But I didn't do it for that reason. I think that's the point. I think most people can tell. I can tell right away when I'm looking at something. I'm like, oh, they're doing this just to post it.
Right.
And I remember one time I had a student say, man, I really want my brother to learn this trumpet part so I can post it on Instagram and it can go viral. And I'm like, no. You want him to learn the trumpet part so that you guys can play it together and it sounds great.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. And I actually want to tie into what you said before. You to continue on with this business conversation, you said that you book all your own tours. So Are you saying that when you go out on tour, you're booking everything from the hotels, the flights? Are you taking care of all of it, or do you have a manager? Do you have a booking agent? What is your process?
I have no manager and I have no booking agent.
So everything's all on your own?
It's all on my own. For a short period of time, I had someone in Europe help for my first tour, help me, who was a booking agent. And then that was it. Because for me, it's like I like to know what's going on. I'm hands-on. And I remember whenever I've worked with somebody, my first record I put out was completely by myself. And so I hired PR and radio. And I'm doing people's jobs because I'm checking in. Did you call this person? Did you do that? So it's like, I should be paying myself to do this.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And matter of fact, I've said that on a couple of episodes. It's like, I've done all the same routes. I've hired a publicist, hired a PR, social media person. And in the end, I've always found that the best results tend to just come when I just do it myself.
Yeah, and it's not that hard, people. Like, everyone's accessible. It's like, if you want to, it's like if you're doing a gig and you booked it yourself, ask the venue, hey, what's your PR list? Can I have your contacts? I'm playing in San Francisco. Let me get the Chronicle. Let me get this person. And invite people out. If maybe you have to pay for their ticket or something, but they're going to write about your show, and then that leads to something else. I mean, more content when people search your name on the internet, and you have articles come up, that's way better.
Yeah. So let's say, for number one, I guess, how are you getting people to book you? I mean, obviously you've had, your career is established, but, if you're doing it by yourself, that means you're having to call clubs and you're having to wait for responses and emails. And are you booking an anchor date first? I mean, for those that are listening who don't know, an anchor date's usually the date that the event that you have that's going to produce the most amount of money, and then you're booking stuff around that. How are you dealing with your touring? Like, what's your process?
Yeah, it's definitely, I'll start with an anchor date. And usually that's what starts the tour. It's like, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do a tour. I'm not usually going to go out just to do one thing unless it's really lucrative and fun. But like, for example, I think I heard you talk about this on your podcast. Like, when you're first starting, you're not going to make a ton of money or any. You're going to lose money. My credo and like way of life is I want to make sure that the band is always taken care of. No one has ever played for me for free, and I'll pay out of my pocket. So I remember a long time ago, I played at the Blue Note in New York, their brunch set. And that didn't pay, I don't know what it paid, maybe just a couple $100. And I'm lucky that my husband has family close in New York and Long Island, so usually accommodations are easy. But also, I think we paid for our own hotel because like they had kids and all that. So you want to be cool for the gig. But this is just a little anecdote. Milk everything for what it's worth. Okay, so you're playing at the Blue Note. That's a big deal.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though it's the brunch set and there's a bunch of tourists, but I invited someone from the New Yorker. Their information's out there. So
and he just showed up.
He showed up, and he wrote something. And I love this quote. I think it's Katie plays with like something like the spirit of like a Mack truck, like a Rolls Royce Mack truck with a Rolls Royce engine, and her voice is some smallish delight. And I'm like, yeah, I am a softie. And so like having a quote from the New Yorker is big. So it helps you like when you're getting gigs. I'll do things by email, but I like to call people. So when you call someone like, yeah, send me your stuff. So if you have your EPK, you got the New Yorker on there, NPR, stuff like that. It's really helpful. But even that gig at Blue Note, so he was there. And then there was an educator there from Iowa. And he was like, wow, we'd love to have you come out to our school to do a masterclass in a performance. And they had a ton of money. So that was a good, and I've done things with them since then. So it's like, you just never know.
Right. And you're booking. So once you book that, like, let's say you booked that event with the, whatever, doing that clinic.
Yeah.
I'm sure they had a decent amount of money. And then are you booking, saying, okay, that's where we're going to start. And then I'm booking clubs out from there to drive to them?
Yep. I'm going to book clubs out from there, drive or fly. Actually, this was a good period of my life. I'm a Delta girl now. But okay. This was in the Southwest days, Southwest Airlines. This is not a plug, but they had this credit card deal. If you got their credit card, you could get a free companion pass every single flight. And so my husband at the time played drums with me. So not so great for like tax purposes, but for my budget it was. So we would fly. He would fly everywhere with me for free, which is really helpful, which is great when you're in the Midwest. But it's, you're in Iowa, then you're going to Missouri, Kansas. And
would you drive yourself?
Some places you could drive. Yeah, I would do the driving, but most of the time we'd be flying. If it was like less than a 4-hour, if it was more than a 4-hour drive, we'd be flying. Yeah.
And so you're booking, you're speaking to these club owners, and I'm assuming a lot of them aren't like paying. I mean, jazz clubs, for those that don't know, they don't tend to pay amazing. I guess most music venues aren't playing amazing unless you're doing festivals anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you making all the numbers work? Were you, especially in the beginning, were you coming out of pocket a lot? I mean,
oh yeah, and not terribly, but like I would usually not come home with money, but I'd probably break even. And then I started building some recognition and some establishment so that you could more. It's so funny when like clubs or jazz societies will be like, "Well, how much are you going to charge?" And it's like, "Well, this isn't a background gig. We're not like negotiating that. You obviously have a budget, right?" And I remember there was a jazz society in Nashville or some Germantown Performing Arts Center, and it's a black box theater, which I like because like 200 seats and below, bam, I could do that. That's fine, and I prefer that more to like a big audience. And I remember giving them a quote for 4 people for 2 shows, 2 separate ticket events that night of $3,500, and I think I had to get to that number, and they were like, "We've never paid anybody this much," and I saw who they had there, and I'm never like, let me just try and get as much money, but we have to make it worthwhile. And I said, don't worry, like you're gonna sell tickets, because I do my part too. Like I don't want to play to an empty audience; it's stupid. And they were just like, we've never, paid someone this much money. I was like, okay, well, let's see, okay. And so they said yes, and both shows were sold out. And then, wow, this was so amazing. It's like, but I also think that. Venues have been burned by people saying like, yeah, we're going to do promotion and all this. And people just don't do it because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I was even talking like, with Amber Navran on one of the podcasts. I was asking her a similar question about booking tours. And they were the same thing in the beginning. I mean, the Moonchild group was driving around in a van. The same kind of idea. It's fascinating to me. So you're doing then the negotiating with the clubs.
Yep. Negotiating. And it's fun. More so, not to sound snooty, but like I like being in Europe more nowadays because it's easy to be out there for a long time because you can take a train everywhere. You don't have to fly so much. So yeah, I'm negotiating over there, and then I got to think, okay, what's the euro at?
Yeah, but you're also traveling with a bass, an acoustic bass, which is monstrous. Are you flying with your own bass, or are you borrowing basses wherever you go?
I borrow basses, or venues have them, but that's also a cool thing, especially in Europe. Like Phil Palombi, the bass player, started a website called rentabass.com.
Oh, wow.
And so I've met a ton of cool people that way who have their basses up, and
you just rent them?
You rent them, or they just come like, oh yeah, I'll just come see the show. Can you get me a ticket? And I remember I was in Paris at, I can't remember his name. Electric bass player has a club called Club Nubia. And this bass player came and he was like, here's my bass. And then it turns out he did a bunch of lessons with Ray Brown, so we're talking about that. So I don't travel with my bass, not even domestically, unless I'm driving, just because that's a whole other thing. Like, it's such a crapshoot. Like, I had a friend, she plays in the Baltimore Symphony, and they lost her bass for like a few days. And I'm like, what? How do you lose a bass,
Wow. That's terrible, especially because those are on upward of, 10 grand?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure hers was probably like 40 or 50 grand.
Oh, my gosh.
So for me, like, and I've learned this too secondhand from Ray Brown, it's like my sound is always in my hands, and it comes from what you're hearing first. And in my head, I try to be very positive. So I might get to the venue and play the bass and just like, okay, we're going to be okay. But also it kind of pushes you. I remember I was in Serbia one time doing this jazz festival, and the bass was obviously made out of like many different instruments because it was what they had there.
Right. Wow.
And then it just turned out, I had so much fun because I was like, I would have never played the way I played that night if it wasn't for that bass. So I had a good time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Amazing.
Willow, weep for me. Bend your branches down along the stream that runs to sea. Listen to my plea. Hear me, Willow.
Okay, so the first year that I really took seriously booking myself, I released my debut record, or what? That was so stupid to say. My debut record.
Yeah.
Introducing Katie Thiroux in 2015. I did it on my own. And then I booked one tour to promote that. And one was like a huge anchor that Berkeley actually helped me with, Berkeley WBGO.
Right.
So we did something
It was
in
Berkeley
Boston.
College of Music.
Yeah, Berkeley College of Music. And that was a really nice like platform that concert was on YouTube Live. So we did that. The Catano in New York City, which I'm not sure is still going. And I just picked up the phone, called the guy, and he's, who are you? That kind of a thing.
Of course.
And then the Side Door in Connecticut, which was quite new at the time. And so I definitely didn't make any money on that tour. And so I didn't really do too much more booking for myself that year just because I was just like...
Beat up a little bit?
kind of beat up and just like I still needed to make money. That was that was my income. But in 2016, I was like, okay, I'm going to take this really seriously. And I had approached a bunch of agents and managers like asking, for them to work with me. And they said, no. They said... Because I did a lot of promotion myself. They're like, there's nothing much more that we could do for you that you're not doing yourself. And I said, come on, be real.
Yeah,
like
I'm not a booking agents.
I'm not a baby. And they're like, yeah, no, you're like, this is as like you're doing great. And we would just be taking money from you. I'm like, okay. And then other people would be like, you're just not big enough yet. And honestly, like I remember one person just saying like, put the bass down, you just need to sing and like, put makeup on. And so I was like, okay, click. But in 2016, I was like, okay, this is my job. I need to be more serious about it. I was teaching a little bit, but, playing like as a side person, which is really important to me too. But I applied to 100 festivals because I knew that's where you get more exposure.
That's a lot of freaking festivals.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the website was called. But again, everything's on Google. So I just looked up and I found this database of festivals. So let me go through. I made an online EPK because I had video. Like that was when it was still kind of hard for me to like use technology. But I had some really good video content from this thing I did at Berkeley.
Just so everyone knows, EPK, electronic press kit, they're digital kind of press kit that you would send out.
Yeah, and they're so easy to do now.
Yeah.
And I had my little bio because I would ask other people, what are you sending? And I would ask, other agents, like, just send me a sample of what I need to be sending.
Yeah.
So I applied to 100 festivals, both domestic and abroad. And I actually got one out of 100. And it was the Juneau Jazz and Classics Jazz Festival.
In Canada?
In Alaska. Pretty darn close to Canada. And it was actually because the director had a relationship with the saxophone player that was in my band. And she's like, I love Roger. We had his big band up here. So that was kind of, I don't think if she didn't know that he was in the band, like that would have happened. But from that, one experience, I kind of snowballed and was able to do other things. So that 1 out of 100 really stuck with me. It's a numbers game. Yeah. The less you pick up the phone, the less gigs you're going to get. That's just math.
So I mean, you're chasing gigs.
Yeah.
I think even Vince Mendoza, for those that don't know, Vince is one of the great orchestrators of our time. I think he even told me too. He still we'll call up an artist, be like, "Hey, we should do this. I have an idea for this." Like, it's still like calling and like saying, "Hey, we should do this. What about this?" Like, always offering the ideas to do something because the phone doesn't just always ring.
Yeah, and there was just a great. I think it was John Clayton told me if the phone's not ringing, pick up the phone. Yeah. And that was at that time in my life, it wasn't ringing for my group. It was ringing for me to play with other people. And that was another thing that was important to me. Like I said, being a side person, which is kind of a lost art, playing in other people's bands. Because back in the day, you could go through Freddie Hubbard's band, Betty Carter, Art Blakey, Ray Brown, and that didn't exist for me at that time. So that was important for me too, to kind of get that experience and not just go out and, okay, I'm going to lead my own band because I've earned it now. It's like, no, I want to learn from someone else. So for a couple of years, I was playing with this great piano player, Larry Fuller, going on the road with him and learning, just playing with him was just a masterclass and learning the way that he does business and stuff. So
Yeah. God, 100 festivals you applied to and you got one.
Yeah. And then, like I said, I prefer going to Europe more now. Also because, like we said, like the music that I like to play is like, people go out there. So like it could be Monday night in LA and people aren't going to go out because I got to work in the morning. Over in Europe, it's like, yeah, let me go out, have a drink. And going, doesn't matter what kind of music they go out to listen to. They kind of, I feel like the culture kind of just appreciates live music and that you're there playing. So that's why I like going out there. And that's really fun to book gigs over there for me and meet people.
Let me change things to something that, I want to ask because it's got to be difficult. Again, you're a woman playing jazz music, which is primarily male-dominated. You're playing bass, which there's hardly any female bass players. Did you find it tough when you were coming up? I mean, we both went to Berklee College of Music, which was fun, at least for me. Did you find it tough? And do you still find it being challenging? And how did you overcome that? Or give me some idea as to what it's like. I mean, because it's got to be an extra hurdle that's added on because there's just not many women in jazz music.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, it's only tough for me now hearing other people's stories and that I work with younger women, like hearing what they have to go through now. Because quite honestly, I experienced nothing to my face, at least, growing up. And I come from like a hard knocks, strong family. Like, you'd think we're like street folk. Like, folk. We'll jump you. And so it was never, like, there was never an opportunity for me to feel a certain way or not. And I think I was also an individual, a unique experience because, like, I just loved to practice. So, and no one ever had to tell me to do something. My mom also plays bass. And so that's why she told me, we all started on, I'm one of four. And so she said when I was 8, we all started on violin and we were all like terrible. We're not like the Von Trapps either. We're not like a talented family. We're like adequate. And, but when I was 8, I was like, man, I can't play this violin anymore. I sound awful. It was like, I'm not having fun. And she said, why don't you try the bass? Everyone always needs a bass player, so you always have a job. But as an 8-year-old, I wasn't really thinking like, oh, cool,
Yeah, of course.
But it was really when I first I had my first lesson, and then like, it was every person in their own field has that experience. Like if you're a baseball player, you hold a baseball bat. And so for me, that was like, oh, I'm home now. This is what I have to do. And so I don't know. It just, I never experienced, like I said, to my face, any prejudice. I think also being a bass player in a jazz setting, there's only one. So if you're going to fuck with the bass player, excuse me, then you don't have a bass player. And if you don't have a bass player, you can't play. I'd never maybe I did have that vibe. No one ever messed with me. But maybe that was also another reason why. And when I had a great experience at Berklee as well. I don't know. It just, and I've had, women in my band, and I've never thought like, I'm going to hire this person because of this or that.
Right.
But like I said, I've only experienced it, which seems so crazy now in this day and age when like everything's more out in the open. And I remember working with a student, and she said, yeah, my boyfriend said I have to quit playing bass or he's going to break up with me because it's such a manly instrument. I'm like, okay, you can hit him in the head with your bass. Like,
wow, that is really out there. So, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that you didn't really have anything like that. And
I would say not until after I had a baby did I experience any discrimination. And, people would say like, oh, are you still going to play? Like, even play music? Like, are you still going to perform? Are you going to...
Well, why would you not?
Yeah.
That's really weird.
And so that was the only time I ever experienced any discrimination. Or like people would...
or you just felt like it was like, that's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And so I never had that growing up. So I was like, this is a new feeling,
Totally. Give me your Desert Island album, and then give me your top 3 albums in general.
Okay.
And you can't cheat either by giving me some like
a
well, I
collection
can't
best
choose
of.
between these two.
I'm gonna choose like the ultimate best of Miles Davis.
Yeah, the ultimate best of mine.
Yeah.
You have to pick just one album as your desert island, and then maybe 3 that you love and would recommend that like people who are that want to really feel kind of what you're feeling from those records check out.
Honestly, my desert island record would be Frank Rossellino's "Turn Me Loose."
Turn Me Loose. All right.
It's a trio record. Frank Rossellino was an amazing trombone player. He had some mental issues, but that aside, don't Google him. That aside, amazing trombone player and singer. He sings on this record, and the rhythm section is Chuck Berghofer, a bass player who's still around. He lives in L.A. Victor Feldman on piano and on drums. Oh, man. Irv Kotler, I want to say, who played with Sinatra. I think that's who it is. So the rhythm section's like killing. I don't know. It's maybe 10 tunes. No song is more than 3 minutes. And it's perfect. Intro, maybe a little interlude, endings. So it's just like this perfect, like, wrapped package. And Frank Rossellino plays and sings with so much intensity.
Oh, I love
the
it.
song choices are great. There's 1 or 2 of his own originals. So I would say that is my favorite.
That's your desert island right there.
Yeah, I could listen to that anytime.
Okay, top 3 albums that you feel have influenced you so much and that other people should check out because you just love them that much.
Yeah, so I'll have to choose my favorite Ray Brown record, which that's actually really hard to do. But if I could.
I thought it was going to be We Get Requests, but.
Yeah. Well, that's Oscar Peterson.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah,
I meant Oscar Peterson.
But Ray Brown is on it. I do like that one.
Every time I think of Ray Brown, I'm always thinking of that record for some reason also.
Yeah, because it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say I'll go with like the 3 artists and I'll do their record. So Ray Brown, that's kind of hard. I love Live in Tokyo 1988, but actually let's just go with that one. Okay. But I'm going to scratch that. I like, Ray Brown live at Kawamba, which I think is Bass Face. And that's on Telarc Records, which at that time was only classical music. But Ray Brown went to Telarc and said, hey, you're going to record a jazz record. It was the first jazz record they ever did, and the sound is really bad. And so they had like the van there in the back, recording it, and Ray Brown went to listen to the first set, and he was like, you got to do something about this. So it's hard to transcribe, but you have to like have your headphones and blasting. That one's really good. And I just love that story of Ray Brown. His business prowess was like, Telarc, you can start. And now Telarc's like a huge jazz label.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Okay, so Chet Baker. People, they hate on Chet Baker because
only Miles hates on Chet Baker.
Yeah. But I love Chet Baker because you can always, when he's singing or playing, you always feel something from it. I don't know if that's, intentional. I hope I think it is.
Which Chet Baker record?
There's It Could Happen to You is really, really good. For that, also that kind of same Frank Rossellino reason of like the arrangements, I would suggest that one. But I think my favorite one right now is Chet Baker live in Chateauvillain, 1977 or 78. Because it's loose. There's a lot of things happening. I like how he splits up choruses. Like half a solo will be trumpet, and then I'm going to start singing now. Start soloing. So for me, as an instrumentalist vocalist too, that's pretty cool. The last one's kind of hard, but I think I'm going to go with, because I love big bands so much, Count Basie, Frank Sinatra. It's hard to pick just the one of the records, but I'm going to go,
Live at the Sands, or
No.
Might As Well Be Swing?
not, because that one's the white one. The one that's brown, where they're on the covers, the one that has wives and lovers.
So it's
'Cause
the
there's
Sinatra.
two-
There's
there's
a
two
Sinatra,
records.
right? It Might As Well Be Swing, and then Sinatra Basie.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
Not the live one, but yeah, the Sinatra Basie. But when I listen to it as a together, both of those records.
Right.
So.
Well, matter of fact, online you can only find those two
Right?
now.
Yeah,
They
I know.
call it Sinatra Basie, but it actually is.
They're two separate records.
Yeah, it Might As Well Be Swing. You can't find that anymore online because now it's all in that
Exactly.
one.
So I'm gonna lump that into one record.
You can
then.
do that. That's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, let me ask you. This is always difficult for people to answer a lot, which is because it leaves you so vulnerable. Which is, what is the lowest point in your career where you just felt, or did you even have this moment where you're like, what the hell am I doing playing music? Why am I doing this? And then maybe on the converse, What was the highest, the height of your career thus far? What do you think?
Yeah, lowest moment, and I still have those moments sometimes, and I know a lot of people do. So when I was putting out my first record, I wasn't so savvy, and I paid for everything myself, and it actually ended up from start to finish costing me $30,000, which sounds crazy, but I remember PR was like $6,000, radio was another couple thousand, and then studio, mixing and mastering, so when I did the math, I was like, that's a lot of money. So I was saving up, and I remember I took every single gig I could because that was the only way I made money. And I just like, not that I was against getting a 9 to 5, I just like, I couldn't do that. And someone had recommended me, someone like, I know they were great, recommended me to do this gig. And I was like, yeah, this person recommended me, should be good. And it paid $100 probably for like, 6 hours of background.
Oh my God.
And it was at a Thai buffet restaurant, and it was a singer's gig. And I was just like, wanted to like jump off the stage and like blow my head off because the singer was so bad.
Wow.
And I was like, man, I'm doing this because I have to. So that was like a mind shift in my head. Like, I have to do this because I need to make that $100 to do not only the things I want to do, but to pay my rent and my car and all that stuff. So that was a huge mind shift for me. And I remember there was a point in my life, it was probably like 2016, when I started saying no to all of those gigs because I just, in my energy, I was like, I don't want to do it for 2 reasons. One, a lot of the musicians didn't take the music seriously on the gig. Because for me, if I do that, it's an opportunity to, practice and like, you should be having fun. So I didn't want to do that. And I just like, I only wanted to do the things I wanted to do. And so when I started saying no, all these other doors started opening up because I wasn't doing it because I needed to have money. And then it opened, me not doing it opened it for other people. I was able to recommend like students or other people who like, they really needed them. So that was a low point where I learned a lot.
Did you just feel like were you questioning why you were doing music?
Oh, yeah. I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending all this money to put this record out? I could have bought a car. I could have put a down payment on a house. Yeah. And so that was a real, and even when my record was done, it took a 1.5 years for me to release it. And now I don't even remember why, but I remember just being like, does anyone want to hear this? I've put so much, like, this wasted so much time. And then it turned out like, okay, this is fine, everything's gonna be okay. But yeah, there was that moment too. And then I would say
give me the highest moment now, like where you felt like, man, you've accomplished something pretty significant for yourself that you're like, man, you're really proud of that.
There was a very specific moment. I was doing something at the San Diego, wherever their orchestra plays. I don't know what that is. It's like our Walt Disney Concert Hall.
Right.
And it was like, I almost always say no to like an all-female like band thing.
Right. Why?
Because I just don't think, it's like, would you have an all-white man band on purpose? Would you have an all-old person band? It's like, but it was at that time, I feel like it was maybe 2018. And this flute player, Holly Hoffman, she was asked to put together a group in San Diego to do something at the concert hall. And it took me a long time to say, yeah, I'll do it. Because it's like, we're all just musicians. But I remember I did my own solo bass and voice thing. And I remember being in front of the audience being like, wow, there's like 5,000 people here. This is pretty cool. So that was a high moment. And I would say the second high moment was like, just like getting through the end of like, booking a 1-month long tour and everyone's alive. That's a big deal.
And did you come out with money?
And we came out with money. Although this is another story. The piano player had the wrong date for the first gig and missed it. So.
Oh, you gotta love the quote unquote wrong date.
Yeah. It was okay. His wife was pregnant. He was going through a lot. And then it turns out that there was a piano player in Sweden that he was going to come anyways. And I said, dude, can you play tonight? And he did. And he killed it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining the pod. I mean, your career continues to astound me. I mean, luckily I get to work with you all the time, so it's always a pleasure for me. So thanks for sharing your knowledge and giving great advice. I'm sure everyone will be wanting to hit you up. So where should they reach you if they want to get at you?
Instagram's really easy, just at Katie Thiroux, and I'm pretty good with my DMs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Katie, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
Folks, that is all the time we have for today's episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this pod so you can stay up to date with new shows, giveaways, and more importantly, the concerts. You know I'm always trying to get you to come out to the shows. My big band is always playing at Vibrato Jazz Club here in town. You should come. If you can't, or if you want to know what I'm doing at all times, you can also follow me on Instagram at SpicyGMusic, or check out my website, jasongoldmanmusic.com, to see what projects I'm currently working on and to see when I'll be performing next. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Much love.